Hello, hello. Ciao Richard.
Ciao,
Ciao, welcome to Living
come
Room.
stai?
Benino, grazie. How are you? What's up?
Um, Not too much. I'm hanging in there and uh ready to talk about photography and art and kind of where my attention's been focused these days.
Nice. Great.
Um, on a like I guess from a creative perspective, I've actually found this time to be um in way com- has inspired me to find new ways of being creative. So I've just recently started doing some self-portraiture,
Oh,
which has been challenging because I don't really love the way I look anymore.
oh,
So I mean, not that I loved the way I looked, but it's uh, as you get older, it gets, um,
gorgeous.
uh, I see the changes happening, and so um, it's a little painful making the self portraits because I'm not, you know, uh, I'm more self critical. And what's also funny is I've spent some time going through um, my archive and looking at older pictures, and some older pictures of myself. I put together like a slideshow of self portraits that I've made through the years. And it's funny, I was like looking at these older pictures of myself from 10 or 15 or 20 years ago. And back then I didn't like them. I thought, oh God, I don't look good in this picture. And now I look at them and I'm like, why was I so unhappy? I looked great back then. How could I have even possibly have perceived that these were not, acceptable to my ego back then?
Sure.
Because now, as you get older, the I think Fran Lebowitz says the worst picture of you when you're like in your 20s is probably better than any picture of you when you're older. And it's quite true actually. But so yeah, so I've been spending time making self-portraits and going through my archive, and I've spent time making portraits. Actually, I've done some work for the New Yorker. I did a series of portraits on the street last month on the apex of um, the coronavirus in New York City. And so I went all over the city and I photographed people, mostly masked, but not exclusively wearing masks, all around New York. And it was really kind of felt like it was important and meaningful work to make that work on on that day in this new um, heartbreaking era that we're all living through.
Yeah.
And then creatively, I think I've had a lot of a lot of time to look at things and to um, watch things. And I have to admit I've had a little bit of difficulty reading since this all started happening because it was hard to focus.
Mhm.
And I'm sure that's not some something unfamiliar to you that you haven't heard.
Sure.
Um, but prior to like the beginning of March, when this all started really getting really intense, is I was reading a ton. And so, and I love to read both fiction and nonfiction. Um, and I, I don't necessarily, I'm not a huge fan of like reading criticism, art criticism. Um, but I love just to read narrative um, and also some theory is interesting. And one of those books that I really enjoyed was this book by Jenny Odell on how to do nothing. I really recommend it. And it's about basically how the information age and this uh, era of social media is always placing demands on our attention. And, you know, with all these influencers and, you know, people trying to get us to like their like things or, you know, pay attention to what they're broadcasting and what these companies are profiting from the more time spent on their apps, you know, the hours you log on and spend on Instagram or Facebook or Twitter. And Jenny Odell writes about how to sort of like turn that off.
Wow.
And that we're being used in a way, you know, that those companies, just like television, had every interest in keeping our attention. So do all these applications that were supposed to somehow provide us with even more freedom and more choice, and in a way they've actually depleted a lot of our choices and our freedom by trying to keep us in their infrastructure. And she talks a lot about walking and going for walks and observing and just listening to nature and being in nature, which kind of has led me down other paths. There's a book I just started by Rebecca Solnit, who's one of my favorite writers about walking and the history of walking.
That's beautiful.
And so I think there's like, and she actually talks about Rebecca Solnit in this book. So that was a really wonderful book. And it was thought-provoking and critical. And I think it's an important book for where we are now, and especially even more so in a sense with us being now even more captive in a way to our computers and to the digital world, and sort of it being, you know, a way now, a necessity to try and connect with other people when we can't physically connect. Though I think that comes with a whole new set of frustrations about not being able to touch and to be in the presence of our friends and family and loved ones. So this is a really painful moment in human history. So anyway.
And is there any other book you'd like to show us?
Yeah. Well, this was this was a Christmas present for myself. And it's Masahisa Fukasi. I think you can see the spine there. Family. And this was by a Japanese artist photographer whose father owned a photo studio, and in sort of a smaller town in Japan. And he went back on visits to see his father and his family, and he did a series of portraits with the family, self portraits. So it's sort of like touching on that. I think this is the actual family house and studio. And then here is a picture of his family. And he'll do interesting things like have family members turn away from the camera, have everyone turned away, except one person turning at the camera. And then sometimes they'll introduce, sometimes there'll be a nude, someone nude. So I think they're very subversive. I mean, I think they really challenge different ideas of family and intimacy, and sexuality in the context of family. And then there are pictures of his parents, and then him with his father, which I think is just wonderful. And then what I understand is there are moments where he introduces other members that are not part of the family. So, and I'm not sure who, you know, there's not necessarily a caption of who is and who isn't a family member, but sometimes there are special guests, you know, which is in a way, I think, actually an honest way of talking about how the family, the idea of family can extend beyond just our blood relatives. And so when there's these special guests that appear throughout the book, and then sometimes we have family members show up as portraits. And I believe that sometimes there had been some deaths in his family. And so then the representation of those people are made through photographs. And so I think it's like a really very smart and subversive and intimate depiction of the immediate family and sort of the offshoots of our family. And it's done over time. So there's that, you know, there's this sense of passage of time. It was apparently this photographer also did a book called The Ravens, which was a very big photo book, I think, in the 70s in Japan. But he's really only been reintroduced the last couple of years. And this book came out, published by Mac, I think just last year, early last year. So I think this is a really, really important book, and I'm so glad it came into my life. And then one of my favorite photographers is Evelyn Hofer. Do you know her?
Yes.
Yeah. And this is a book, this is made printed by Steidl, but it's her work from New York. And Evelyn Hofer had such a, I think, a tender and delicate eye, and was a great portraitist. I think, let's see if I can find one. Oh, I love this image. There's just a lot of luscious color in her work. This is not only portraiture though, but oh, this is great. Look at that. There's just such a, I think there's kinship with how I photograph people to Evelyn Hofer. I've always like taught her to my students and tried to introduce her to a new audience. And she was really active in the 60s and 70s in particular. Here's another one that's fantastic. And so there's like, I think a real interest in even though she photographed for actually Harper's, in a fashion magazine. Most of the subject matter she was concerned with were just real people there, and I think there's like a rawness and an honesty to her portraiture. And this is the second collection of her work that's been published. The first book by Steidl was just of her portrait work, and then this also has really beautiful cityscapes. Like a this is a stoop in Harlem, I believe. Really nice Kodachrome, I think, film. So that there's that gorgeous magical color. Fantastic eccentrics. It really also celebrates the diversity of New York, the different kinds of people. It's,
Wow.
that's kind of a good image for New York this month, with over almost 30,000 deaths in the city. And then, do you know this book, John Myers?
I know John Myers, yeah. I don't know the book though.
Yeah. This, I think this guy was kind of like obscure, and uh, and then I forget even who published it. It's called RB Photo Books. But I just got like an email about this work. But again, I think these are all mostly in Great Britain or the United Kingdom.
Mhm.
But he's a great portraitist. This one is a fantastic Christmas image. Really great environments. Really nice full-length head-to-toe portraits of really amazing backgrounds. Again, like, oh, this one's amazing. In her bedroom with her Donny Osmond poster.
Beautiful.
I really like his use of space in the home environment. Like, I think he's really thoughtful about his positioning. And even though they're all made at home, there's a cleanliness to the compositions, and there's like a lack of chaos. And I think here's this one amazing one of a giraffe in the zoo. So like these are three of my recent acquisitions from the last year that I keep coming back to, you know. And of course, I have a certain fondness and affection for portraiture, and it's like there's been so much in the art world. There's always this focus on the new and someone making something new, but I am sometimes more suspicious of the new, or at least I think I approach it with a certain pessimism, because I want to think about and see how it fits in the greater history of art, and where context of course changes, right? And I think right now even the context of work is shifting. There's a whole paradigm shift now in our human culture from the last 3 months, and how are things going to sit now in the history of art, history of photography. How will we look at things that were made 2, 5, 10, 20 years ago? a lot of it seems frivolous now and meaningless. And so how do we find meaning or attach meaning to things? Um, and for me, one of the things I most like is our classical approaches to things. And when I think about the history of portraiture, I'm still always drawn to those very classical approaches to um, having a subject and the artist have a connection or a relation to each other, and I think that'll never change. Um, so and it's great to see and watch how people um, skillfully approach that and how they convey those relationships. And it there is often, sometimes I think, artists share kinship with those that came before them, but also people bring always their unique voice, or should try to or can bring a unique voice to that same approach, and shift it slightly and add something from within themselves. Yeah.
Yeah, yeah, I agree. I relate to that. Well, Richard, thank you so much for your generosity.
Yeah, sure.
And
I
well,
can tell it's getting darker now there.
it is. Yes,
Yeah.
yes. And dogs are barking. I don't know why. Um, so please take care and be safe.
Yes, same with you.
Yes, and hopefully we will hug each other soon.
Yeah, I hope so too.
Yeah.
All right. Are you going to stay on for a second?
Yes, just
Okay.
stop
Okay.
it. Bye.